Perception. Now, why is perception so important when it comes to self-discipline, who you are, the things you do, your thoughts, etc.? Now, I have in the last couple of months taken a very long, brief pause away from the regular mainstream red pill mindset, grinder, grifter, whatever mindset. And through that journey of getting away from that, I realized a lot of things. I made a lot of progress, more progress actually in the last couple months of my life from doing these new certain things and changing these things about myself than just trying to brute force it the way that the red pill does. So, again, before we start this video, if you are a red pill person, whatever, you don't like this type of content, cool, you can please kick off my channel. I don't care to have you. The people that I'm actually looking for, who I want to be a part of this channel and to see this video, who are going to see this video, are the people who understand the thoughts and understand the concepts of what I'm talking about. Even if you're a beginner, if you have an open mind and you understand yourself to even the smallest degree, you should be able to understand this topic. Now, let's get into it. Perception. Now, when we're talking about perception, what I'm talking about is I'm talking about the inner and outer perception of yourself. So let's break this off into multiple different colors. I'll call your inner perception. Let's use purple for it. So you have an inner perception, right? What is this? When we talk about inner perception is the ability to look at yourself as a consciousness, as a being, as a soul inside of a physical vessel, and understand what you are and who you are and the power that you hold inside of yourself. Your inner perception contains so many things, but the bare minimum that it contains is, first of all, your self-thoughts. So your inner perception contains the thoughts that you think to yourself. That voice in the back of your head is just yourself talking to you. That's just the inner part of you talking to this brain, talking to this tool that is inside of yourself. I need y'all to realize something when it comes to who you are and what you are. You aren't just a brain inside of a body that's feeling and going through these things. You are a being who's put into a vessel to experience life in whatever way that our brain can process it. Your brain is a tool for you to use, and since it's a tool, you need to understand that you can train it to do certain positive and negative things. When your self-thoughts are constantly negative, when they're constantly rooted in insecurity, because that's another really important thing. Inside of your own self-thoughts, your self-thoughts is an inner perception of you. Your self-thoughts contain the beliefs that you have of yourself. If you believe that you are a loser, if you believe you aren't deserving of love, if you believe that you are a person who can't do things right, a person who can't do XYZ, you're not a good son, you're not a good father, you're not a good mother, daughter, whatever thoughts and perception you have of yourself, those are inner core beliefs. You need to understand that these are things that you're constantly imprinting inside of yourself. Like, if you're constantly having self-doubts and self-thoughts, remember, your inner perception is your consciousness. It's you as yourself, you as your being inside of yourself, being inside of this vessel. So if you are constantly telling your inner perception, you, actual you, that you are all of these negative things, of course you're never going to be able to get to the position that you want in life. You change your beliefs, you change who you are, because again, your beliefs is the fundamental system of how you think you are. Your beliefs includes like your fears. It includes your fears. It includes your wants. Your needs. It contains ego, right? Which is another really big thing. It contains all of your emotional spectrum, because your brain is trying to literally, like, the emotions you feel as a human being and the ones that go through your brain are two different sets of emotions. You need to be able to differentiate between both of them. That's a video I can get into, another topic I can talk about for 30 minutes of going on. But inside of your beliefs, you have your fears, your wants, your needs, your ego, the emotion inside of you, as well as, this is a really important version, an inner child, right? Now, a thing that comes from your inner perception and your self-thoughts is really your inner child feels an emotion. And inside of these emotions, there's multiple different things. Your needs, your wants, your fears, your egos, your likes, your dislikes, stuff like that. Confidence, Like, there's so many different parts about yourself that comes from this, but all of this mixes together and creates your beliefs, which then goes into your self-thoughts, or your inner perception of who you are, your belief system, your foundation, right? Like your morals and your principles, who you are as a person. All of these things comes down to your self-thoughts, which really can come down to and link back to your inner child. Now, why is this so important into becoming a better entrepreneur, better business owner, husband, mother, whatever? You need to understand that if this person right here, if this thing was ever hurt or destroyed in any type of way, what's going to happen is you're going to start having a much more warped version of yourself. If you were a child who was never given the space to explore yourself, figure yourself out, things of that sort, of course, as you started aging, becoming an adult, it became harder for you to be able to sit down for long hours and be able to actually work, to actually muster up the courage to go and do things, to have the self-confidence to take risks, etc. Stuff like that. The reason why that came from is because your self-child was damaged. Now, let's talk about this. Your self-child, the child that is inside of you, is formed from another thing as well. And this is something that is extremely important. The self-child is formed from an outer perception as well. So, this right here, plus this right here, is exactly what creates your inner child. If you have a bad outer perception from your life, if you had parents who never allowed you to be yourself, if you had peers who never allowed you to be yourself, if you were constrained into a box, you were never given the opportunity to know who you are, your perception of who you are isn't based on yourself. It's based on the outer perception given to you by the people around you, given to you by the people who don't understand who you truly are as a being, right? You need to understand a lot of things is that a lot of people aren't really tapped into actually how powerful and the things that they can actually do, which is so crazy in my mind. But a lot of people aren't tapped into that, and a lot of people operate out of a place of hurt, of insecurity, of ego, of selfishness, of greed, of selflessness that's disguised as ego. So many different things. People can be trying to guide you in the right way, not knowing that they're actually pushing their own problems and the things that they went through onto you. So if your outer perception of yourself was warped from the beginning, you never understood who you were before. That's why as you started aging, you didn't know who you were. It was so hard for you to do certain things. Even now, as you try to change your life, right? You try to become a better businessman, entrepreneur, whatever you want to do, anything in your life. The reason why you started struggling and it's so hard for you to stay consistent is because the outer perception of who you are is so cooked. And because this outer perception also indirectly and directly affects your inner perception, because this is a two-way street, no matter what. This right here is a two-way street. Your outer perception is directly affected by your inner perception, and your inner perception is directly affected by your outer perception. The easiest way to explain this is to use a term that I learned recently in psychology. When you are looking at something as yourself, when a human being looks at an object, there's two things that happens immediately. Number one, we see the object. We get the sensory data. And that sensory data is then pushed to our brain and is then interpreted and is percepted a certain way based off of our own beliefs, our own past knowledge, our own past experiences. You see kind of what I'm getting at? If your outer perception has been filled with nothing but negative experiences, you've never had any good spaces, it's only been negative, of course your inner perception of yourself is going to be very negative, because your outer perception of yourself was always being infected by negative habits, negative people, negative things. There's always something bad that was going on inside of your life. You weren't given the opportunity to flourish and truly experience who you were. Again, you can't get mad at these people because, again, this is everybody's first time living on earth. you gotta remember that your parents are raising you for the first time. You gotta give them a little bit of grace and understand that yes, they may have fucked you up in some type of ways. Yes, they may have not given you all the tools you needed, but yes, they tried their best. And now it is up to you to actually take that a step further and continue growing as a human being. Now again, as your outer perception is being affected by people's own, experiences, right? Because again, remember, everything comes down to perception as a human being. Perception is the thing that matters the most. It runs on previous experiences, previous memories, previous, background knowledge. Again, if you're taking this background knowledge and as you're growing up, 4, 5, 6, 7, these really highly critical developmental parts of your life, when you're constantly taking negative perceptions and negative outcomes and negative opinions from all these different people, that starts weighing on you. That starts making you doubt yourself. And as you start doubting yourself, and as you stop realizing who you truly are and start adopting this man-given perception that other people manufactured and handed to you, of course your inner perception is going to be off. You don't know yourself. You don't know your core beliefs, your core morals, your core principles, because at the end of the day, the thing that is so solid, the foundation, what you start off as, was cooked from the beginning. It was destroyed. So of course it's going to be so hard for you to get to this point, to actually get to a positive point, if all of this has been negatively affected. So that's a great explanation for that. Now, let's connect all of this together. Now you might be asking, okay, so now I know all about my outer and inner perception and how much all of that affects me. I know how it's crafted. I know how it's created. What can I do to become better? Now, that's a really good question. The first thing we know is that your perception is affected by, again, the child that is inside of you. So now, what you need to do is you need to take all of the things that you put up as a kid, all of these walls, all of these lines are walls. And behind those walls is trauma, is experiences, all these different things, whether it was negative or good, whatever it might have been. You have all of these things that have been built up. And if you are a person who's crafted shields against them, you have crafted this ability to not really care or to kind of push them to the side because you're too fearful to confront them, you're never going to be able to bust through all of this and directly affect this person, directly affect what actually crafts who you are, right? If you can't bust through any of these walls, you'll never be able to get access to your inner child. You'll never be able to access the core fundamental belief of who you are, right? You ever notice you're the most happy whenever you're doing the thing that you always wanted to do as a kid, right? You feel the most confident. It feels the most freeing. It feels the most in line with who you are. Well, yeah, because at the end of the day, you knew what you were at the very beginning. But because, again, as humans, we don't understand truly what we are, we put all these man-given or man-made perceptions of whatever we go through onto each other, generation by generation by generation by generation, right? So as that existential crisis, as all of that existential line and trauma gets moved down the family line, of course it's really not that hard to see why some people ended up in the place that they did. But again, remember, all of this comes down to you at the end of the day. Nothing will change unless you want to change. So how do we affect the inner child? How do we get into it more positively? Again, you need to bust down these walls. But every single time you need to bust down these walls, it's filled with different emotions, different care packages of things that you have left behind, right? Skeletons in the closet. The first thing you need to be able to do is actually and start doing is confronting these things. You need to be able to confront them. And the first way to start confronting something is by thinking about it. Is when you start thinking about it and you start noticing. The more you think and notice your own thoughts, your own inner beliefs about who you are and seeing if they affect you negatively or positively, the more you're able to confront yourself every single time. The more walls you bust through, the more things that you understand, the more layers of yourself that you peel back like an onion. Right? The easier and easier it becomes to confront yourself on every single front, to be able to notice these things, to understand how you think, to understand why you think, right? Because now if you need to confront it, you now need to be able to go from confronting it to understanding it, right? If you can, everybody can confront everybody. So what you need to be able to do is you need to take a step back and not only confront them, but then understand them. Look at them for what they are. Is this trauma that I have experienced from, my childhood? Is this things that I've gone through as a human being? Like, what are these things and how do they affect me? Because once you start understanding something, you start being able to understand something. There's a difference between understanding and understanding. Understanding is understanding how something works. Understanding is understanding how that affects you internally, innerly, who you are. So the more you understand something and you start understanding these thoughts and these traumas and these walls that you're going through, the more you can understand it, the more you can metabolize it, the more that you can actually notice them, right? So as you start understanding and noticing them, guess what starts happening? This is the last thing that you can start doing. Is realization. It's realization. The more that you actually realize, look at this. The more that you actually understand and realize about yourself and more about the things that you're actually going through, and the more that you can do that, the more that you can then start making either a positive change or a negative change. Whatever order. Right? Because now you've busted through all your walls. You've busted through your traumas. You've understood who you are as a person. Right? But now you get to the foundational level, who you were as a child. You start confronting these things by thinking about them first and noticing about them, right? Being able to put those two together to be able to confront the thought. But then as you confront the thought, you need to be able to understand said thought. If you can't understand why you're feeling the way that you are, then there's really no hope for you. But remember, everything in life can be trained. You can train yourself to understand and understand yourself. So you can understand and train yourself to understand everything about the emotions you're processing. Why did I feel like the way that I did? What triggered me to get to that point? But now that you confronted this with understanding, you now need to understand it. Take it internally. Okay, I know that this event triggered me. What happened to me? What has caused me to be able to do this? Because remember, everything that happens to you in life is based off perception, an inner and outer perception of who you are. Remember that. So, again, if you can't go back and look and perceive and see how these things have shaped you, you can't start changing your perception of who you are. Start making yourself believing that this is actually truly who you are. This is the things that you deserve and the things that really matter to you and the things that really will help propel you forward. Right? Now, as you start understanding all of this, you now come to the realization that, okay, I understand all of this. I understand what's going on. I understand what's happened to me. All these different things. You have this realization, and now you have two options. You either take a positive route by dismantling all of the traumas, the barriers, all these things, and changing who you truly are, changing your perception of yourself at a fundamental level, right? By rewiring your perception of who you are, getting rid of that man-made perception of who you are, and actually understanding who you are internally. Not what they tell you who you are, but who you know you are. You need to understand that. So as you make this change, you can make a positive change and start working towards that and building your life up. Or you can really just stay negative and not really change your life. Again, this is your life. You clicked on this video. You wanted this knowledge. I'm glad that you did. But with that being said, it's the entire video, y'all. I hope you enjoyed. Like the video, comment, subscribe. I'm out.